Lakes water, communicate Great Lakes water issues to the general public. We're an interdisciplinary collective of writers, historians, filmmakers, scientists, urban planners, artists, and community organizers. And we create tools to visualize the future scenarios of water sources and engage the public in water planning. Tonight's event is the first in a series this spring to continue conversations started in our latest work, The Backward River. The Backward River is a digital, audiovisual, interactive experience which tells the story of the Chicago River. Through a variety of different media, we show who bears the burden of the current status quo of the waterway. To that end, we created 6 characters to personify the branches of the river. Each character has a monologue which you can listen to hear the river speak. And I'll actually show you what I mean by that. I'm going to share my screen now and give you a little tour of the Backward River. So here you see the homepage. 2 chapters here, the river speaks, the Chicago River is a pipeline. So we have an interactive map that you can click on right here. So there's 6 characters to represent each branch of the river. And so you can just click it. There's a lot of background information to give you some context on what that particular part of the river is used for. And then you can listen to the river speak its truth. We have a little monologue that you can listen to. These characters are a tool through which we can form an emotional bond with the river and thereby reimagine a different future for the water, one in which we're in a more reciprocal, participatory relationship to the water so that we appreciate it and take care of this life-giving source. In addition to the audio monologues by the 6 characters, we also have 2 podcasts, Freshwater Radio, hosted by myself, and Water Chronicles, hosted by Becky Lyons. There's also a whole visual narrative that uses storytelling and photographs to shine a light on aspects of the river that not many people know about. Finally, we've included a toolkit to help you get engaged. After learning the real story and listening to the river speak, we have suggestions for how to move forward with this information. It's highly worth your time, and you can view all of it at thebackwardriver.org. The next panel in our series is titled Militarizing Rivers, the River as Pipeline and Walls in Water. It will be held on March 11th, and Backward River team member Kathleen Blackburn will be in conversation with an exciting slate of speakers about engineered waterways and how rivers are effectively turned into pipelines for petroleum under the Army Corps of Engineers. You might have caught Kathleen at the Freshwater Media Festival, where the Backward River premiered last December, where she broke down how language shapes our thinking about water. This will be a continuation of the conversation around reimagining how to restore and reuse streams in our shared waterways. All right, that's it for me. I'm going to pass it to Rasaan now. He's going to moderate the conversation among our panelists. And stay tuned, at the top of the hour, I'm going to be back and I'm going to actually play one of the characters for you so you can listen to the river speak, and then we can have a little kickback about that. All righty, that's it for me.
All right, welcome everybody. My name is Rasaan Khalil, and this is our very first in a series of upcoming speeches and panels by the Backwater River Project with the Freshwater Lab Media Group as a part of the digital story project about the Chicago River, with the goal of continuing the initiated conversation about the project and lending a voice to the river and the surrounding community. So first, we're gonna get into some introductions. I wish I had cool theme music for everybody, but next time. First, we have Yesenia M. Chavez, AKA Yaya the Boss, who is an activist and organizer raised on the southeast side of Chicago. She considers herself a vessel for change in her community, as well as pursuing environmental health and equity for all. And next, we have Isaias Hernandez, the captain and creator of Queer Brown Vegan. He is an environmental educator, where he introduces forms of environmentalism through colorful graphics, illustrations, and videos, where he seeks to provide a safe space for like-minded environmentalists to advance the discourse around the climate crisis. Last but not least, we have Brandon Tyus, who's a Detroit native focusing on community engagement. And he is he's a policy associate with the Freshwater Future, and is also the vice chair of the Benton Harbor Community Water Council. So welcome everybody. How's everybody feeling?
Good, really good. Thank you.
Yes. So welcome. So we talked a little bit. A bit about community, right? So each of us, we all do work in the community. How would you define community, and how does it inform your work as educators and organizers?
I guess I'll go first. I think community for me holds a lot of intrinsic value of groups of people that uphold like cultural, spiritual, and religious values. And I think that the most important thing to realize is that most change, especially with system change and institutional change, has cultivated within communities. And so the phrase, I think, of communities create change, not institutions, is that we see changes within the institutions only because the community that has cultivated these people, especially, created these types of implementations for systems that are more equitable or recognizing environmental justice as its main proponent.
Excellent, thank you. Yesenia, what do you think? Did you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, that's intimidating. That was such a good answer. For me, community it's kind of like another family in a sense. Like you have your blood relatives, you know, but then you have just a community of people that are like-minded, that have the same kind of values and morals as yourself, and work towards, you know, just the same kind of goals as you too.
Got it. Thank you. Brandon?
Yeah, so for me, community is the definition of it takes a village to raise a child. You know, it's everybody's family, and you grow up living a certain lifestyle that's unique to everywhere else in the world, whether it be strengths, weaknesses, problems, or opportunities. And that is what creates the bond and trust within a community.
Excellent, thank you. So we all have a new president. We just got through a very, very tumultuous administration, and we have a new president. And within the president's first 100 days so far, President Biden has issued roughly 40 executive orders in the last 30 days, namely suspending new oil and gas leases on public lands, as well as conserving at least 30% of federal lands and waters by 2030. Are there any other things that you would like to see the president do as far as executive orders around climate change?
I'll hop in. So the first thing that I would also like to uplift the Biden administration for is putting the U.S. back on the Paris Agreement. That is something that was huge and something that really speaks to my heart, because it takes, you know, community is relative, because in the whole world, us as humanity, we live as community. So all of us playing playing our part as we can will make a difference. So Paris Agreement for me is definitely a hitter.
Yeah, I think for me, what I would like to see from the Biden administration that hits a little bit close to home to what's going on in the 10th Ward, which is where I'm from, on the southeast side of Chicago, is stricter policy surrounding air polluting businesses and like polluting industry, and also having policy, like environmental policy in particular, that kind of encompasses improving public health. Because right now what we're seeing is that a lot of the policy in Chicago is just basically benefiting a lot of these businesses, and they get off with polluting entire communities and decreasing life expectancies with just a slap on the wrist type fines. So for me, it would be something like a carbon tax for these polluting industries, and even so, like offering like healthcare for very vulnerable communities or environmental justice communities, along with just kind of ramping up the restrictions on polluting entities too.
Yeah, I think for me, like, it's really great to see an administration finally recognize environmental justice as one of its important core values, whereas I think for so long, sometimes people did not want to validate or say that environmental justice was a thing. Another thing I think that's been great from this administration is the operations or development of a climate task force and the citizen task force. I think it's really integral for a lot of communities to be playing really key citizen or science roles in these communities as leaders. And despite having degrees or not, I think that everyone's a scientist. And so I think it's really important that the ones that are able to kind of suggest these implementations for policies are the people in those communities.
Excellent, thank you. So Yesenia, you touched on something that I really want you to speak a little bit more about. I know you and I are Chicagoans, but not everybody on the panel is, not everybody that may be watching is. It's the 11th day of the Chicago hunger strike. What is that, and why do we need to care about this?
So it's the 15th. I'm on my 11th day. I joined a couple days after my comrades. So a couple of my comrades are half a month into it, which quick shout out to them. Shout out to all my people in South Chicago and the Southeast side. And the decision to go on a hunger strike was a very difficult one, to be honest, because we started campaigning against a serial polluter that was located in the north side of Chicago in a white, wealthy neighborhood by the name of General Iron. This company in particular had an array of violations of safety policy. They had explosions that released toxic pollutants into the atmosphere and neurotoxins that essentially the community up north was inhaling. So it got to a point where that community organized well enough to kick this company out of Lincoln Park. But what's happening now is that General Iron is being allowed to come to a predominantly Black and Latinx neighborhood, which is my neighborhood, the 10th Ward. And we're labeling it as, which is what it is environmental racism. And that term in particular for a lot of people can be confusing because they're like, well, how can environment be racist? But it's more so the policy that surrounds the safety and the guarding of the environment that's racist and anti-Black, right? And classist, which is what we're seeing happening here. So the battle between the city and the polluting happened last year. We went through all of the systems and all of the obstacles that the city put in place. We did public comments, we did town halls, we did calling our alderwoman, writing letters, educating our community as far as what toxic pollutants are going to be released into the air, all the way up until like particulate matter specifics and really technical language. And we just didn't really see any traction with the city with those actions that we worked so hard for. So the decision came about just a few months ago, and it was just a group of us, and we're like, look, like we need to put a stop to this now, because it's not just the southeast side of Chicago that's dealing with this, it's other neighborhoods in Chicago that have a similar demographic of Black and Latinx residents of immigrant descent as well, that are facing these high levels of pollution, and ultimately their life expectancy is just decreasing. Meanwhile, you have industry that's just profiting off the backs of these families, multi-generational families, and it's just not fair. So based on that observation, we decided to take action and put our own bodies on the line to protect our neighborhoods and those alike that are being abused and neglected politically and misrepresented by political entities in Chicago. And just to make a statement that we're not going to back down until policy is created to keep one, public health safe, and two, to start to appreciate the land that was given to us. So yeah, so we're on the 15th day, I'm on the 11th. It's been really challenging. We're just doing fluids, no solid food, so just water, broth. And it's interesting that all of this is happening in the middle of a pandemic, right? A global crisis, which is even crazier because our immune systems are already compromised. But the point here is that I think the communities in Chicago and even nationwide similarly have suffered enough, and it's time for a change. And old policy and old traditions, I think they just need to die out, and there needs to be more creativity behind bringing in greener jobs, bringing in a more sustainable way of living to enable communities alike, the 10th ward, to have a more robust opportunity at life.
Thank you. So you mentioned that we're on the 15th day. What can we do to get involved?
Oh, thank you for asking. That's so sweet. So Freshwater Lab, it has been amazing on social media with sharing the content all over the place. I've been very honored that you all have been sharing. That in itself is just great advocacy, just having those conversations with people, you know, really digging into those tough combos where you're talking about what environmental racism looks like and why it should be just diminished. There have also been like one-day solidarity hunger strikes or fast, where we even had recently, well, today actually, the students at our local high school at George Washington High School, shout out to them, they did a one-day fast to stand in solidarity with us. And that's kind of been a citywide, nationwide thing where people join in and just fast for a day to be in solidarity with the hunger strikers. But obviously we know that's a lot to ask during a pandemic. So we're totally okay, you know, with just sharing the information, calling, you know, your local representatives and asking them what they're doing to jump into the fight to actually implement policy that's going to protect neighborhoods like ours.
Awesome, thank you. So,
Here.
oh, did you have something you want to say? Something else?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Awesome, for sure. So we talk. So you mentioned we talk about institutions. Freshwater Lab is an entity, a byproduct of the University of Illinois at Chicago. What role does major institutions like universities have, and what part do they play in fighting against climate change and social injustice? How can we hold these institutions that we educate our communities and that we pay this money to, and we owe this money to? How do we hold those institutions accountable, and what role do they play in fighting against injustice? What role should they play, rather?
So, because I know that institutions, in reality, institutions play a huge role in what happens in policy. And because of that fact, if there are programs or incentives that are out for the community, one of the largest responsibilities that I think institutions need to take is properly educating the community, because they can put out all of these programs, all of these incentives, out to the public, but when you distribute information that doesn't have the vernacular of the community that you're communicating with, it goes over their heads, and then opportunity isn't seized in the areas that are necessary. So I think that can be one of the greatest ways that education can be uplifted and true change can be implemented, as we all understand we can act better. So.
All right, thank you. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think if I may, I think leveraging institutions like colleges and high schools and even elementary schools or local school councils is really important to the movement, because you have just a platform that's already, started in the community that runs off of like academic development and academic flourishing, right? And to hold those institutions accountable on something like environmental justice, you have to look at the bigger picture, because education and academic development goes beyond the school doors, like it doesn't just stop there. Like a high school student doesn't just leave their classroom and their education is done. Like you have to nourish the lifestyle of these students from a lot of different angles. You have to educate and give them the tools to not only understand what's going on, but to also act if they have concerns. So I think it's really important to leverage educational and academic institutions, because they also have a responsibility to protect the environment of students and to ensure that just students in general have what they need in order to fully academically develop.
I was gonna say, like, just like everyone's response is so critical, so good. Like that there needs to be, I guess, like from universities and institutions like that we all have attended, is that there needs to be an acknowledgement of the legacy of harm that these institutions have played a role in. And I think too, there needs to be an intergenerational movement that's cultivated. And I think that I've seen this with college universities, especially when pressuring the University of California to divest from fossil fuels, is that it doesn't just stop at the seniors, it doesn't just stop at the freshmen entering, but rather it brings the perspectives of those that are way older than us and those who are way younger than us, and to acknowledge that these movements necessarily are not new, they're just building upon each other. And I think that that's one of the most critical things to really acknowledge in my own work too, is that, you know, those frontline communities, those grassroots organizers that have laid the path for holding these institutions accountable, that blossomed over time for us to continue taking up that work and sharing it with others.
Awesome, thank you. So Brandon mentioned something, he talked about accessibility, right? A lot of people in the community don't necessarily have the time. They may work 2 or 3 jobs. They don't have time to organize, to protest, to do the different things that it takes to hold our legislators accountable. What I wanted to know is a question specifically for Isaias. How I wanted you to talk a little bit about the work that Queer Brown Vegan does to make this information more accessible for people who are, you know, just scrolling. We spend hours and hours each week on social media, right? Talk about Queer Brown Vegan and how you're making it more accessible for people in the community and people at large to get this information.
Yeah, I think for me, you know, I didn't know exactly what environmental justice meant until I was a senior, when an EJ group came to my high school and literally talked about pollution in my community. And that's what finally, that word validated all those experiences that I had. And so I think that the most important thing when creating education on my end is that it comes through a community lens. And so that incorporates 3 perspectives that I love to always advocate for, is the acknowledgement of indigenous wisdom and historical practices. 2 is cultural-based experiences. And then 3 is your lived experiences, whether that be in academia, whether that be with your friends. And I think this creates a holistic view of how we see it. But I think too, for younger generations, is that we create imagery that represents us, that looks like us, that is inclusive of people's bodies, identities. And I think for me, when I create designs, especially with a book that I created with a designer, is that we wanted to really showcase that when we talk about environmental justice, food justice, that there's a picture, not to say that that's exactly who you'll find at these movements, but someone that looks like them from their community. And I think that it starts from the home, the dinner table, or what you would say the living room or the bedroom, is that these are kind of the most toughest and hardest conversations to have with your family, because no family is perfect. All our siblings, parents have said something that is something problematic, you know. And so how do we hold each other accountable is that I think the youth, especially like my community, especially being Gen Z and millennials, is that we have a role to just hold our community accountable. That starts with those conversations that are generally uncomfortable truths, but I think it impacts a lot of privilege in our roles and how we can now redistribute that power.
Awesome. Okay. So, I'm talking about these movements. I wanted to ask. So how is the movement for environmental justice connected to other movements for social change? Because I think that it's often, you know, for people who are not really invested or who don't know a lot about environmental justice, they can look at it, oh, this is just a group of hippies who like to lay in trees and like to just be earthy. But how is that connected to other movements for social change and social injustice?
I think that's a really good question, and it seems complicated, but for me, it ties all into mental health. And I say that because social interactions and like social actions in general are like residual from behavior, right? And essentially people are going to reflect what they feel valued as. So if you look around you and your environment or your surroundings are just, for example, the 10th ward, just brownfield, Superfund sites with neurotoxins in the soil. You have a beautiful park, but across from that, all you see is like bunches of smoke. Then are you really going to care about what goes on in society? No, because what you're looking at is somebody not giving a concern about your own life and your own health. So for me, it kind of ties into just a health aspect of really making people understand, one, that their health and their life is valued. And then two, providing a different opportunity to just kind of perceive a different reality, because a lot of the reality that we face, let's be transparent, is based on white supremacy, right? So a lot of us here in this call are oppressed because of the systems that have been in place because of white supremacy and because of capitalism. So we're unfortunately doing the work where we have to dismantle a lot of this like false narrative where this is the only reality that we can face, when that's not really the truth. So it's just providing people a different sense or a different foundation where they can value themselves and then have that value and confidence be reflected in their surroundings and in their environment too.
Awesome.
I love that. I love that a lot, especially because value is what plays a huge role, because when you can set up an environment in a way where it undermines, it encourages you to undermine your own value, that places an unseen slavery, around us, that kind of keeps us enslaved to suffer in silence. And when we don't know, and we don't know who to ask, we continue to suffer in silence without really knowing that everybody else is going through that same issue. And with the bigger problem is that environmental justice is on the same platform as every other social change that's out there. And so I believe utilizing environmental justice in a way where, no, you don't have to be a product of your environment. Better yet, you can augment your environment by doing these steps and participating. And by undergoing that change and going through those revelations, you can then, basically ask, okay, what else can I do? And environmental justice is very much connected to racism, to sexism, to any other ism that's out there. And I believe that it can be a huge step to elevate, to augment somebody's life when they can know what they can do.
Isaiah, did you want to add? Did you have anything you wanted to add? You good? Okay. Awesome. So I just had something came to me. I'm thinking, okay. So let me see questions. So how relevant is the larger global change? Just that, how relevant is the larger global climate change movement to community organizers on the ground in a local and neighborhood level?
That's super relevant. I mean, everything starts on the ground, and you have to meet people where they're at, and work with them and help them understand what the picture looks like just within their community and their surroundings, and then also relate that to the larger picture, either nationally or globally, so they can understand how, say, both situations are intertwined. Because if you try to go too grand with someone that doesn't understand just the concept of like global warming, for example, and you can't really put it into perspective for their own realities on a day-to-day basis, it can be easier dismissed or just looked at something that's not really important, especially for the demographics that are often affected by these environmental injustices, where, like you mentioned, that they're working 2-3 jobs, or they're dealing with poverty. So environmental justice isn't the first thing in front of their minds to have to combat. But if you put it into perspective for them where they can understand, like, okay, if I can't even plant in my own soil because I have air pollutants, then what can I do in order to fix that where I can have a more sustainable way of living? And then from there, you kind of build the relationship and plant the seed for the idea to blossom in their own minds. And then for me, that's when the organic conversations begin to happen, is when you make it relative to the individual and their reality.
For sure.
I think also what Yesenia was saying, like there's just different roles community plays, and not everyone has to be an activist. And I think this is what I've noticed, especially as my role as an educator, is that I don't see myself as an activist, but more of a support role, where there doesn't need to be that much labor placed on grassroots frontline activists to explain what climate justice or climate change is, because at this point a lot of them are very underfunded, burnt out, have to face a lot of other issues. And so how do we really create ourselves, situate ourselves in this environmental movement, is that you don't need to be an educator. You can be a painter, you can be a designer, you can be a music artist. Like there's different ways of how we communicate. And especially with, I think with COVID, I think it's kind of increased this disparities that we see today. But I think that we've also see this activation, especially online, of people creating themselves, even though it's more accessible for them, especially those who may be immunocompromised. So I think it's really understanding, activating those people, that you don't need to be an activist, but there's so many amazing things how you can support activists.
Awesome.
Yeah. Actually, I just want to hammer on that because I really like Isaiah's point, because there are many facets to one piece, and I think of it like I think of like, you know, a business, say a business that's out there polluting our environment. They're creating leverage. They have different sectors in each one, and each person is being able to represent 24 hours and being able to leverage 10, 20, 50 people in that one day. And when you take that same concept of leverage in different areas of one concept, and then you put that with global climate movement, I look at that leverage and say there are people like Isaiah, there are people like Yesenia, there are people like us who are all doing different things to support the world in a better way. But because it's a global climate movement, all of that is being leveraged, because now we can be comforted with the thought that the work that we're doing is being 10 times. So that means, you know, leverage is now being created with the good decision in mind moving forward.
Excellent. So people talk, we talk a lot about carbon in the how the part that carbon plays in our in polluting our atmosphere. What is a carbon footprint for people who don't know, and how can we monitor that to take the personal responsibility to reduce our carbon footprint?
Well, I always like to say like carbon handprint versus footprint, because I think that corporations, I think where carbon footprint was a sense to be designed to look into like the amount of resources we're using as individuals. However, there's a certain uncomfortable truth that doesn't cover the amount of impact the environment takes from corporation standing. And so this looks into the amount of natural resources being used and how much it is to be regenerated every yearly by the earth. And so I think at this point of year, we're using, I think, around 10 times the amount of yearly earth rotations of its resources. And many of the resources we do use, especially with non-renewable resources, have depleted rapidly. And so I think with carbon handprint, I'd say there's just so many easier ways. And I think there's a lot of ways a lot of us have done that, whether it be through public transportation, whether that be through recycling, whether that be through eating less meat. There's just a difference. And I think with corporate carbon footprint, that's where there is often no accountability for, or people have tried to hold them accountable on that end.
Yeah, I second that. That was very real, because it's important to acknowledge the responsibility and kind of the weight that's placed on people at times, you know, where they're like, oh, are you recycling, and are you doing this, and are you doing that? But then when you look at some of the statistics of these polluting industries, where, for example, in the 10th ward, our industrial corridor dumped about 1 million pounds of toxic waste into our environment. And it's just like, okay, well, nobody's really there's no uproar about that, but God forbid somebody, you know, forgets to bring their bags to the grocery store and they get mean looks. So I like the way that Isaiah broke it down into understanding that, like, although there is a responsibility within ourselves as individuals to be a little bit more conscious as far as like how many resources we are utilizing, it is also important to uphold that same standard for these corporations that are financially abusing their environment and also taking advantage of the public too.
Excellent. Isaiah, you said something about, you talked about food and things that we eat. A lot of people now are shifting towards being vegetarian and vegan. I wanted, would you talk about the vegan movement and I guess I would say, how to frame it, I guess hiccups in the vegan or oversights in the veganism movement?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, veganism is generally portrayed in social media as a diet, but it's a lifestyle that encompasses the anti-oppression for living beings, both humans and non-human animals. And so for me, what really got me invested in these industries is looking into the way factory farms not only slaughter animals, but undocumented farm workers are victims of environmental injustice. And so for me, it's not about what you would say critiquing those, especially indigenous communities due to geographic location or cultural practices that partake in eating meat, or communities that live in food apartheids or food deserts, but rather to look into this very capitalistic industrial system that has not only contributed to environmental degradation, but has harmed so many communities. And so I think for me, veganism is about advocating for the justice of life itself, and understanding that this is an interconnected movement. But also too, I think that the misconception that is often generally accounted for is the fact that veganism sometimes is viewed as elitist or inaccessible. And so you know, there's a lot of issues that go beyond our food systems. And so I think that when having larger conversations about veganism, it's always important to acknowledge how, you know, the food systems that we see today were not designed to serve people, but rather to capitalize and poison us. And this can look into the fact that so many low-income communities don't have access to cultural, healthy, appropriate foods in their areas.
Awesome. So thinking about what we eat, and you touched on veganism. There's been a move. I see people like Bill Gates are pushing for artificial lab created meat. Is that sustainable and healthy? How do you think we should approach the idea of lab created meat?
You know, I think that perhaps it's a way for the industries to try to lessen the impact for the meat industry itself. I think that it's very interesting. I don't think that there's much research yet to be proving that it's much more better. But I do think that, myself speaking, and I think that I necessarily do not need meat in my view, in my lifestyle. However, I know that there's been a lot of cultures that do use it, especially within my own culture. But I think that instead of us investing in these lab technology resources, perhaps really investing in regenerative agriculture, especially that it is an indigenous wisdom and practice, and being allowed that those communities to be able to reclaim their land, rather than us investing in these new products and resources, thinking that it will end suffering in this industry. And that's something that I feel technology and wealth is necessarily not really focused on societal issues, but rather on capitalistic methods to ensure that there's a next product development up their pipeline.
Awesome, thank you. So, seeing as how we just came out of Disability Pride Month, tying it into climate change, how does climate change disproportionately affect people with disabilities? If anybody would like to touch on that.
Yeah, I think it starts with health, you know, like the resources just in general are already scarce. A lot of the clinics, just the mental health clinics in Chicago and medical clinics in general, like we just had a hospital, I think, file for bankruptcy, like Mercy Hospital, and in one of the neighborhoods in Chicago, which is ridiculous that that's happening in the middle of a pandemic. But I think it starts with acknowledging first the scarcity of medical resources available for people with disabilities, and two, just like not making just information tangible in general, and not providing support for them to actually get the help that they need, especially in the midst of a climate crisis.
Brandon, we haven't really gotten to talk too much about the work that you do in Michigan. Could you give a little bit of history about the Benton Harbor Water Council, your role, and what's currently going on? What's currently going on from an internal and from a movement standpoint with the Benton Harbor Water Crisis? I mean, Water Council. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question because I had prior to had a crisis where, you know, working for money doesn't fulfill you in any kind of way. And, you know, after going out and doing some volunteer work, you start to feel that a paycheck that's not monetary is something that's so much more fulfilling. And I would have to say through my volunteer work, one thing led to another. And the mentor, shout out to Reverend Pinckney. He is the best reverend I've ever met, always a ball of fire, great leadership. And he is who inspired me that what was going on in Benton Harbor, you know, action needed to be taken. And what had happened was the city was out of compliance. And what that basically means is the lead and copper rule, particularly in Michigan, is supposed to be 12 parts per bill. They're working for it to be under 12 parts per billion as far as lead concentration is concerned. And the city has not met compliance where the 90th percentile was generally double than what it was supposed to be. And we understand that there are rigid frameworks that the government has to work within, but their whole priority is to take care of the people. And when that's not done and you see the community taking advantage of that, that's something that, you know, really blows your mind. And the company that I work with, Freshwater Future, we create water councils. We help the community create water councils because that we feel that is the best way to get the information closest to the ground. If we have information, if we have people that are in big institutions just rallying off what we think needs to happen, we're not hitting the true core. We're just putting water on a leaf instead of on a root. And so when we were in Benton Harbor, and this is something I want to say for young people, as a quick caveat, is be bold. You know, when you see that there's an issue, I know just because we're young, we're used to looking for approval. Just be bold, obviously within reason, but, you know, ask for forgiveness and not for permission. And it's okay for your leadership, your mentors to tell you, okay, it's time to scale it back, because that means that you did something and you did more, right? And so we believe that moving forward, we can duplicate what we've done in Benton Harbor, such as canvassing throughout the community and understanding what the community really knows. We found out that in Benton Harbor, even though that they have been out of compliance for almost a year, over 60% of residents didn't know that there was a lead issue in their city. And, you know, just going out, passing out water, creating partnerships with the health department to distribute water filters and water cartridges. We actually have a special opportunity in Benton Harbor where water filters and water cartridges are free, but some of the community are elders. Some of them are disabled, and they're not able to make those trips to the health department. So we help organize water filter drives and things. And just seeing that blow up, and just how the opportunity of showing not only the city but the state. You know, we've been working with Nina Sassy, a freshwater advocate in the governor's office. She's been working with us because we are expanding what the community is able to do when the government is open to partnering with the people who are actually living through the problem. And so we see that as an opportunity to be able to duplicate and move forward throughout the Great Lake region. But Benton Harbor has really been turning the city on its head, getting stuff done, and getting the city back on compliance. This past sampling period was awesome.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. We don't want to ignore our Facebook viewers. So we have a question from our previous topic. Could lab-based meat also increase existing chemical pollution?
I think from what the research I've done so far, there are cases that it does use more plastic. However, I think when comparing the legacy of industrial agriculture, especially the chemicals used to inject the animals, and also other things that happen to workers, undocumented workers in those industries, I think that it is a less of a pollution. However, I think it is also critical to ask whether the nutrient content is actually very high and rich, especially because I know that in some indigenous communities, especially with the bison, they talk about the meat being very rich in nutrient for their communities in order to sustain themselves pre-colonial eras. And so I think that it's very important that we ask ourselves, like, if it requires chemicals, we need to critically ask ourselves, like, why is it the fact that we need chemicals, and can we create something that is a societal good that is both environmentally and not healthy but health related to ensure our needs culturally.
Awesome, thank you. So thinking about communities who are most affected by environmental racism, we know that people say that numbers don't lie, right? How can data, what is environmental data, and how can that play a part in trying to skew what's really going on in these communities that are most vulnerable?
Oh, I can jump on that one because we actually had to face that with the city with our campaign. I'll give you a perfect example. So if you go to, we have a resource in the city of Chicago called chicagoatlas.com or .org or something. And basically what it does is you can look up by zip code and it'll give you like the demographics, it'll give you like health information, like any like prevalent diseases in the neighborhood, low opportunity index for children, high economic hardship. And I recently noticed just through my research for the General Iron campaign that for part of the 10th ward, we get asthma rates, which are higher than most in the city. We have a 15% asthma rate for our adults in the 10th ward, but that's just for one of the neighborhoods, which is South Chicago. Where General Iron is going to be located, which is on the east side of the 10th ward, there are no asthma rates that are listed on the Chicago Atlas. And I think that's very convenient because essentially they would be higher there because we have the industrial corridor there that's releasing a lot of particulate matter into the atmosphere. So I'm almost positive that those rates are higher than in South Chicago. So the manipulation of data by the city is just basically relinquishing the power for the people to educate themselves into why an industrial corridor would even be a concern for their public health. And that then diminishes the opportunity for them to act on their concerns, right? So it's manipulation essentially over the community, and it's not right. And it's basically just to continue to feed these polluting entities what they want. It's also making the information just tangible in general for when people do act on injustices, especially environmental injustices. We had to deal with literally battling the city just to get a Spanish translator for a predominantly Latinx neighborhood. And that doesn't make sense because it's like the city of Chicago hasn't been open for 2 years, like the demographic information has been out there. The city of Chicago knows that the 10th ward is predominantly Black and Latinx. So the fact that there's no translator there is just already telling us that our Latinx residents aren't even valued, or they're not even being included in the conversation or being offered a seat at the table, which is a problem, right? Because ultimately that demographic and that population is being affected by the lack of transparency from the city. So just things like that. And there's constant obstacles that are being thrown to vulnerable communities by cities, because ultimately the data doesn't lie, right? But you know, if you can manipulate the data to where it's not there, then you can bend the truth in your favor. And that's what the city of Chicago keeps doing. So ultimately what the 10th Ward has had to do is create our own data. So we've looked for our own resources, like a huge resource for us in the 10th Ward as far as pollution data goes is the Southeast Environmental Task Force. And they've actually done studies on diesel emissions in the 10th Ward and how frequently trucks are going in and out of the industrial corridor. And that information wasn't provided by the city. And that was a big part of our campaign with General Iron. A lot of the information on particulate matter, the research was done by us, because state regulations only speak on one certain particulate matter, which is a larger kind that comes from like dust and mold. But what's being emitted by these polluting industries is a smaller particulate matter, which is more dangerous to our health. And there are no regulations or policy that are strict on the emissions of that. So just to kind of tie everything together, like I said, if you can manipulate the data, then you can manipulate the reality and make it seem like everything's okay when it's really, really dangerous and it's not.
I was gonna add on to what Yesenia was saying about corporate data manipulation. I think this is a very emerging topic, especially with data scientists with environmental data justice. And so I think that the idea of community-based participatory research is a form of data justice because it ensures that people from those community are able to define their own research and to ensure that when they're creating these types of surveys and questions, that is very inclusive to those people that live in those communities. And I think that Hazel M. Johnson, the mother of the EJ movement, she did this in Chicago, where she gathered her community members and created her own forms of data because she knew essentially that the government itself and the city itself was either hiding the data or lying behind this data. And so I think this is an emerging very topic for a lot of data scientists, is to ensure what is good data and does good data actually involve social and environmental justice.
Brandon, would you like to speak to data and water shutoffs? Your experience with that?
That's actually a really interesting topic that we've experienced in Michigan and in Illinois, where water shutoffs were happening, and we would try to get the data, and the administration would tell us that they didn't have good record keeping, or the inventory was bad. And so what we would do, like, we would commonly think that because these people were paying bills, we would be able to keep track of what they were doing financially. So we would put in FOIAs for the bill keeping. And a lot of it was very vague, nothing was specific. And when we tried to go and ask them about it, their answers were just as vague. So we came to realize, and this isn't 100% set in stone, but what we've come to realize is that when a certain amount of time has gone by where people haven't paid their bills or things of that nature, that information begins to get purged. And when people aren't paying it anymore, they just start to send that information out the window, which then takes away the opportunity for us to really dive into the investigation, to really see the heart of the matter. And that is, for us, quite frankly, we believe it's a crime, because that information is public. That's public information for us to be able to take advantage of those problems and see solutions through. So it's not something that we're happy about, obviously, but it's the manipulation that gets in our way for progress.
Awesome, thank you. So at this time, we want to go ahead and go to our Facebook viewers and ask any questions. Do you all have any questions that you would like to ask our all-star panel of educators and organizers at this time?
I guess I did want to ask Yesenia and Brandon, especially because there is a rise, I guess, online of what you would say influencers that do environmental work. And so one of the most important things that I've realized too in this work is how to leverage my platform with EJ orgs, understanding that they receive the least amount of funding compared to any other environmental org, whether when it comes to animal welfare, conservation. And so how do you team up with those that are local in your area, that are content creators or influencers, to ensure that there is a very longevity relationship, that they're leveraging their followers to understand that? Because I think there is a lot of responsibility, especially on myself as a content creator now, is that so many people do follow me from different states, but how do I leverage that in different forms where everyone understand that I can't get to everyone, but I can help as much as I can from my end?
In my personal opinion, this what you're asking, I believe, is a good question, and it makes me think about a bigger topic that I think needs to be addressed in addition to it. I do believe there's a sense of responsibility that influencers have when they are relaying information. And the reason why I say that is this, like I said, this comes to an overarching area where including influencers, when you say Black and brown people or Latinx or people in that group, I would just like to uplift to everybody that all Black and brown and Latinx individuals are not the Black and brown Latinx individuals that we're helping. There are individuals like that are academia, and I think in that pursuit of getting information out and spreading the word, if you're getting information from just because that person is Black or because that person is Latinx, you're actually still doing a top-down approach, just within the color, right? So I think there is a responsibility of making sure that information that influencers want to convey, or even as you partner with influencers, see where they are with their values and their responsibility of getting the right message out.
Yeah, I agree with what Brandon was saying. With content creating, we honestly depended a lot on our students. Like, we just kind of reached out to the students at the high school and asked them if they were interested in creating content, because we knew the community was going to support the students, so we kind of leveraged that option there. With influencers, kind of with a larger platform, my approach essentially is just understanding, and like what Brandon was saying, like, you kind of have to gauge their values and where they're at as far as the topics that you're pursuing to advocate for, and just quite frankly asking, like, hey, can you support me in this? And then more than likely, if so, they're going to offer you a seat at their table for you to just speak on what's going on. And then that kind of opens up so many other opportunities, because those are relationships, they're the relationships that they've established within their network aren't the relationships that you have in your network. So that just opens up an array of opportunities for you and your community. And it just comes with, like, approaching it fearlessly, and just understanding that not everybody's going to be on the same page with you, but there's always somebody out there that will be. You're muted.
Like I was saying, in terms of, this may be a good question for you, Yesenia, organizing, how do you make sure that you accurately show up with your community without co-opting the voices of people who, I guess, are most affected by these issues?
You got to get out of their way. For me, it's just knowing the privilege that I have as an organizer, as somebody that's lighter complected, and knowing how systems would approach me versus approaching, say, my Black friends that are often criminalized for the work that they do, which is just the same as I've been doing. And just offering them the platform that I have and the relationships and the network that I have, and getting out of their way and saying, you let me know what you need from me and I will be working with you shoulder to shoulder. But this is your show. I'm just here to support you, and making sure that those voices that are affected differently from mine understand that they're still valued, whether or not they're treated like I am or not. am a really big advocate for students, and I think student voices are often silenced by adults that don't understand or are intimidated by change. And for me, that's really interesting because we've all been there, right? Like we've all been young, we've all wanted to be included in some type of change that we see going on, and being silenced always sucks, you know, and it makes you angry and it makes you internalize that hurt of not being included. It can be with personal experiences or just academic experiences in general. So a big part of my work as an organizer for the 10th Ward is to make sure that in whatever conversation I'm in, how can we involve students? How is this going to affect students? How can we make sure student voices are being uplifted and their narratives are being told? Because I mean, a lot of the work that we're doing realistically is for them, right? So that's my feedback.
Excellent, thank you. So how do you discuss these types of topics with family who may not you know, come from, or who may not be have a college background? You know, how do you go to say a mother or grandmother who didn't go to college to study these things, and is living in survival mode, and talk about white supremacy or environmental racism? How do you bring that and personalize that with those around you?
I think you need to be gentle with that conversation because, like Yesenia was saying, you know, change can be disruptive, and so I think you need to do what we all should do and just see where they're at first, and instead of imposing what we think they need, because that's just what happens through the passion of helping. You know, we want to help the way we want to and not necessarily assess how that person needs it, especially when it's with our family. You know, they've known us our whole lives, and you know, sometimes that baggage from the past can get in the way of progress in the conversation. And so I think that that in patience and repetition, you know, to break through that barrier and be able to create that change civilly, if that's a word.
Yeah, I think it also comes with understanding that progress and success and just healing in general is non-linear. So like, just because you follow steps 1, 2, 3 doesn't mean that you're going to get 4 as a result. You know, sometimes you can follow steps 1, 2, 3 and you're going to end up back at 1, but you have to be able to keep going. You have to be able to stand your ground and just be confident in the message that you're delivering, and being transparent with yourself as far as the results, and understanding that not everybody's going to be on the same page, and that's totally okay. I've had a lot of difficult conversations with my mom, and one of the more difficult ones that we had was, you know, around policing, and just understanding that some of the injustices that come with the policing system, why they're so heavy, and why it's such an important thing to look at in a different perspective, because there has been a lot of damage done. It may not be to our community per se that we see it on the forefront happening, but these are still human beings, right, that are being mistreated. And if you go back to the core values of somebody that, like Brandon was saying, like, okay, well, what do you value? Do you value people being treated with respect? Yes. Okay. Well, would you agree that this is how people are treated with respect? No. That's how you offer a different perspective. And that's how you kind of start planting that seed just little by little. I've had the same conversation with my grandma, you know, and there's the language barrier there. So a lot of the information that I've consumed has been in English as far as environmental injustices and social justices. And I've had to just start in lamest terms with her, like, well, grandma, like, I don't think it's fair that Lincoln Park gets $6 billion to build high rises and a whole new park, and they have access to their river and get drunk while their babies are running around, you know, by the river, and we don't even have access to our river, you know, like, do you think that's fair? And then she's like, well, no. And then that's how you kind of ease into those conversations. It's just providing just a small example of the contrast, why it's unfair, and then just kind of gauging where they're at from there.
Thank you. So, question for Isaias, as a new vegan, somebody getting into veganism, how would somebody, I guess, sort of assume a conscious, maybe activist role regarding the animal agriculture industry, in its environmental degradation?
I think the first one is add disclaimers to a lot of your work. I think that even though a lot of my community knows what I stand for, sometimes if I don't add that disclaimer of indigenous communities, food apartheids, I mention that, sometimes people are like, you're not mentioning this, you're not saying this. And so I think that's very important. But there's a lot of organizations out there that do so much great work. Genesis Butler, a climate an animal rights activist, has her own organization. And there's an organization called theravencorpse.org, and they're a climate industrial agriculture youth climate movement that fights against these systems of oppression. And so that's really important. And I think it's also important to recognize where our food comes from. Our produce isn't cruelty-free either. Undocumented farm workers are being sprayed with pesticides and having to work long hours, especially in California, where there's an increased amount of heat waves and fires happening in that state. So I think really into those documentaries and those mini videos on YouTube can help expose you to kind of start making these interconnections of how it's related to environmental justice and racism.
Thank you. That was the first question from Becky on Facebook. Her second question is, how do you guys stay up to date on information and at the same time fact check it?
The Google search bar is your best friend. As far as other information is concerned, though, there are some really good, as far as water is concerned. The Great Lakes Commission is a great subscription, a great weekly subscription to add on to. You can honestly, along with the Google search bar is the fact check, but if you want to get news, you can always go to the Google News tab and, just type in environmental. But the whole key is just be motivated enough to want to know what's going on and just continue to read. Reading is something we all need anyway. And documentaries.
Excellent, thank you. If we don't have any more questions from our Facebook audience, then we pass it back on to you, Honest. Thank you for everybody. Thank you for everybody who attended, everybody who watched. I hope that you all learned something. I hope that you're able to start a dialogue with family, friends, and get involved. If that means joining an org or even starting your own, it doesn't have to last for 20 years. It doesn't have to last for 10, but get involved in some way. And we hope that you learn something. And ultimately, thank you. Clap it up. And Honest, it's back to you.
Cool. Thanks, guys. That was really great. Yeah, really, really loved hearing your perspective, and also super proud that you learned these lessons so young, because I just came to these types of awarenesses like in the past 5 years. So shout out to y'all for doing the work from so young. Do y'all want to hear the river speak now? Okay. Do you have a favorite branch? Do you want to, or I'll ask y'all and see if you have a particular branch you want to hear. We have main stem, south branch, north branch, sanitary and ship canal, north shore channel, and northwest branch. I don't know if you all have a particular inkling or preference.
I'm south side, so I'm down for the south branch.
Okay, cool. Let me cue it up. Okay.
For too long, they have silenced us. For too long, they have suffocated us with toxic air. Our babies choke on every breath. For too long, they have poisoned us with tainted water that we are forced to pay for. And if you can't afford it, you're denied a basic human right altogether. I am surrounded by the victims of incremental violence. My people continue to experience this deliberate attack on our humanity through disinvestment, resulting in closed schools, food deserts, and even a lack of parks. Quite frankly, it's not incremental violence at all. From the barrel of a CPD gun to the putrid air that we are forced to breathe, these are all tactics designed to harm and kill us. This is a different kind of genocide. I am here to enact change. We are here to manifest that change. We're not going to continue to be a dumping ground for the city and its hate for us. The North Branch is being forced to conform to a new status quo thanks to rapid gentrification. They're transforming their industrial corridors into corporate playgrounds. Why? Because a bunch of middle-class white kids moved in and just pushed out all of the Black and brown folks already living there. On top of that, the companies that already polluted up north are moving here, down south, to dump their waste on us, as if we're some kind of landfill. And they think it's okay because we're not rich and we're not white. Well, you know what? We're here to say we've had enough. We're here to say we won't tolerate this. And we're here to say they can't do this anymore. Do they think we don't know our own value? They say we could look more beautiful. Pfft, yeah, for more tourists. Well, we say our value exists outside a corporate model. We won't let them pollute us, and we won't stop fighting. They're going to learn that they can't just do this and get away with it. We say collective imagination over capital domination. We're not asking for clean and free water anymore. We're demanding it by any means necessary.
That was performed by Samara Ueda, who's in his mid-20s, I think. So that's on theme for tonight's show, and written by Tristan Ortiz, who's also Gen Z, but pretty powerful. Do y'all have any thoughts, reactions?
That gave me chills. I was like trying to, you ask the organizers I work with, like I get emotional about everything. So it was so hard not to get emotional because it's word for word what we've been telling the city with the pollution battle that we've had for the past year. So it was amazing experiencing it as the river being animated, you know, and feeling that force from an aquatic environment just express the frustration. And kind of visualizing that was really powerful. So, whew, thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah, I'm glad you connected with it. That's what we were going for. So I'm glad it landed. Yeah, there you can hear the rest of the characters on the backwardriver.org. Similarly powerful words from the river. And if do y'all have any closing thoughts or anything you want to share? I think we're about at time right now. So unless y'all have anything you want to close with, I think we'll end on that.
Honestly, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Honestly, I think Rasaan, you were an incredible moderator, and I'm among some incredible panelists. You guys were super wonderful, and I really enjoyed my time in this conversation. Very thought-provoking.
Yeah, same here. And I definitely like to extend just the opportunity, if anybody on Facebook Live that's watching this, if you guys have any questions or don't really know where to start with the environmental justice movement, just feel free to reach out. It can seem like a really complicated process, but everything starts with step one. And, you know, we're here to be leveraged as resources too. And, you know, we may not be experts, but we can definitely help. And thank you.
I just want to say thank you so much again. And also my last question is, Yesenia, I know you mentioned about the hunger strike. How can people get involved? You know, drop the link, anything, just so a lot of people know more about it and raise awareness of what's happening in Chicago.
Also, everybody follow all of these amazing educators and organizers. You can find Isaias at Queer Brown Vegan. You can find Yesenia at Yaya the Boss. That's with a W, with a W-S-E, Boss. Randa, I don't know where we can Where can we keep up with you, Brandon?
To be honest, I'm not a lot on social media, but the best one you can find me at is Facebook. I will put my first and last name.
Awesome.
If I may add, just for the hunger strike, if anybody's interested in following our journey, you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Shy Hunger Strike. You can also follow the hashtag Stop General Iron and hashtag Deny the Permit. Like I said, if you guys have any questions about anything, just feel free to send me a message. Thank you for asking.
All righty. Thanks a bunch, everybody. We'll catch up with you later. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.